Hi, I'm BBQ Brian from the House of Q, and we've got a fantastic recipe to share today for beef ribs on the Yoder Smokers Flattop charcoal grill. Let's get started. So now we're going to get started out here on the charcoal grill, and what I'm going to do is point out how I've set up the charcoal, because for a longer duration on an indirect cook, my two goals when I'm doing this, I'm going to line up the charcoal starting in this corner around the back and across the back, and my meat's going to be placed towards the front. So starting in the corner, we're going to use our electrolyte charcoal starter, turn it on, and start the fire right here in this corner. So I'm going to start in this corner right here and get a nice fire, and gradually the charcoal is going to burn throughout the whole cooking chamber right across here as I cook the ribs. That's exactly what I want. So once we've got our fire started in the corner, there's two things I want to point out is to adjust the vents that are on the bottom, the air intake. That'll allow us to control the fire that's inside the chamber. And on top of that, this particular unit has an adjustable charcoal tray. It's easiest to light what's in the top, but at this point, I'm going to drop it all the way down and have a really controlled indirect fire. We're going to get started on the beef ribs and preparing these. These are short ribs, and one of the characteristics of a short rib is there's going to be 3 bones. They're big, they're nice and meaty as well. But on the back, you may want to trim off any great big fat pockets on the back. On the front, we want to remove a lot of this silver skin and any fat pockets on here and expose the meat. Once we put the rub on there and start cooking, the rub will stick to the meat. It has a much more of a difficult time sticking to the fat that's on here. When you're trimming on the front side of the beef ribs, you want to grab a piece if you can with your fingers and just gently cut with your knife, pulling with your other hand away so you can see gently where to trim on the silver skin as well as the fat pockets that are there. I want to remove as much as I can and allow myself to see visibly as much meat as I can before I put the rub on. At this point, I'm ready to put the seasoning on the outside, and my choice of the seasoning today is Cattleman's Grill, the tri-tip seasoning. I'm going to season liberally on both sides of the ribs, press in the rub onto the outside, and make sure I've got some great coverage all across the beef ribs. Again, my goal is here is to have some great crust and some great flavor. My fire is nice and ready. I know that my cooker is really quite hot, but to moderate your fire on this particular charcoal grill, the 2 vents, you may want to close one completely and leave one way over on this side. Just open a little crack. It'll have enough draft to go through the chamber and out the top here for our smoking, what we want to do on the beef ribs. Open up the lid, take your rack, and keep it away from the fire, say right in the center rack, right in the middle, right here. Make sure everything's looking nice and happy, and close the lid. In this next step, we're going to create a braising liquid, and I want to share with you why am I going through this step. Of course, I can continue cooking and just have just a beautiful rack of ribs to eat in a few hours, if that is, as we finish them up. I've done that time and time again. In this instance, if I'm cooking for Mom or some of my friends that are around the neighborhood, they know that I like looking at additional flavor. And so my choice today is to do exactly that. Add some extra flavor to my beef ribs. Some of the really key ingredients for a really strong braising flavor include celery, garlic, some carrots, and some chopped up onion. Not only do the root vegetables such as the onions and the carrot and the celery provide some great flavor for our braise, but we're going to add in some beef stock, some Worcestershire sauce, as well as some soy sauce into this mixture. That was the beef stock, about 1 liter, about 1 cup of soy sauce, 3 tablespoons of Worcestershire, and one that I like that's really fragrant is this oil. It's a sesame oil, about 3 tablespoons of that one as well. The very last ingredient in the braising liquid is tomato paste. This is about 4 or 5 ounces of tomato paste. We'll stir this all around, and now we're ready to put our ribs in this braising liquid. So we're back at the grill and we're ready to take the ribs off the cooker and put them in the braising liquid. But I wanted to show you what I'm looking for at this point in time on the beef ribs. There's some beautiful crust on the outside. It's not sticking to my finger or leaving an imprint right there. Again, I've checked the temperature to be about 160 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit on the meat temperature. I know that these are ready to go into the braising liquid. So these are the ribs. There's the braising liquid. What I want to do is take this rack and I want to turn it over so that the meat side is down. The bones will be facing at the top. Just like this. And then I'm going to cover this with foil, get that nicely nested in all of that juice, and it's going to slowly soften all the rest of the tissue, and it's going to be covered and back on the smoker to finish. So we've put the ribs in the foil tray, covered it in foil. We've put it back on the charcoal cooker. There's still lots of fuel in there. There's lots of heat. It might be an hour or so, maybe a little bit longer. We're going to use our thermometer and continue to check for doneness. So the rib temperature we're looking for is 200 to 205 degrees. Clearly, 201 right here. It's ready for the next step. Carefully remove the ribs with some tongs. You may need 2 of them on both sides of the rack of the rib. Remove them from the juice, the braise, turn them over, and they're back on the grill. If you've got some onions hanging on or some carrots, put those back into the braising liquid. In a strainer right here, we'll pour off about a cup of that liquid, not all of it. Straining it right here, that is so much flavor. We're gonna add a little bit, maybe another cup or so of House of Q's Rockin' Red barbecue sauce. Stir it about, make sure it's equally mixed. And this will be the glaze, the finishing step for our spare ribs. So the beef ribs are back on the cooker right here. You can see they're starting to dry and get a crust again. We've got our glaze. We want to liberally apply this all over, and almost to mop our glazing sauce on the beef ribs and finish them up. Just the beautiful flavor, pulling everything all together. Oh. It's time for another mop on the ribs. They're starting to caramelize, look really juicy. Oh, absolutely perfect. They're looking really good. Meantime, as I look through the cooker, I'm starting to run out of charcoal. And don't forget that particularly on these charcoal cookers, I can raise the tray so that I've got my ribs closer to the heat and the remaining charcoal that's there. After a couple of layers of glaze, I've removed the ribs and put them on the cutting board right here. And I'm gonna rest them for a few minutes. How long? I always get this question, and it's not a matter of time, but allowing the meat to rest, allow the moisture to settle within the meat is always perfect. But most importantly, I'm not gonna burn myself when I start cutting and handling the meat. To cut your ribs, turn them so you can see both the top and the bottom of the rib, and you wanna take your knife and align it from the here to the bottom on both sides and cut evenly right on in between where the meat will divide the bones evenly. Move on over to the next bone. There's only 2 to do. Align your knife, slice on through. So on these beef ribs, what I'm looking for is just a beautiful smoke ring, that red color on the surface, the crust on the outside and the glaze that we've done. But just as you squeeze this, you can tell this is a very juicy and very tender beef rib. To serve these, if you've got more than 3 guests, you're in a problem right here. If you've got 3 guests, perfect. But to make things a little bit easier, what we're gonna do is focus on this rib. You can cut them off of the bone just by slicing against right here, removing these big bones, and then taking slices of your beef rib, and you can serve your guests that way. This is a perfect, even as an appetizer, talk about something that can only imagine what your entree would be after this as an appetizer. This looks like the perfect bite to eat. What a beautiful flavor. Smoky. There's some sweetness from the meat naturally. The glaze, the flavor from the braise between the sesame oil and the soy sauce. This is fantastic. This is a beautiful rib. If you're looking for the recipe, it will be on the blog. And if you're looking for more information about the guys behind me, the cookers, go to yodersmokers.com. Thanks for watching. I'm BBQ Brian from House of Q. It's time for me to have another bite.